In May 2005, a young woman was rushed to hospital with a horrific facial injury. 6 months later, she went on to make medical history. French doctors took a controversial decision to perform an operation that had been banned in almost every other country in the world.
The healing of people has always been about making dangerous, so-called dodgy, scary, frightening, almost Frankenstein decisions. That's the way medicines had to proceed for centuries.
For some, it has redefined the boundaries of transplant surgery.
I thought it was a wonderful step forward. It caused a significant change, both in public perception of the procedure, but also the professional perception of the procedure.
Others question the ethics of the operation and fear the consequences.
The evidence doesn't suggest that this is an option that should be offered to patients because the risks are way above the potential benefits.
This is the story of Isabelle Dinoir, the world's first recipient of a face transplant. Early last year, 38-year-old Isabelle Dinoir was admitted to hospital in the French town of Amiens. Isabelle had been mauled by her pet dog. Her nose, lips and chin had been completely torn away.
I fell down. Well, I must have done because I can't remember what happened. When I came to, there was blood on the ground. And I tried to get up, to stand up, but I couldn't manage it. I didn't realize the state I was in, only that I had blood on my arms. I tried to light a cigarette, but I never got it to light.
This woman turned up one day on a stretcher. It was 3 weeks since the accident. A dog bite that took off the lower half of her face. She had no longer any lips, nose or chin. It was all exposed. She had a loose bandage over it and a stomach tube feeding her. She couldn't take anything in through her mouth.
With such severe injuries, Isabelle simply hid from the world.
Even in the corridor, the mask is always on. Even to go to the shower, it's on. The first time I went outside, in some ways, I was happy to go out, but in other ways, I was frightened to leave the hospital. At the start, I cried every time I went out. Some people don't say anything out of the ordinary. They say hello, they talk. Other people look and shrink back. In the shops, some people even hide out of the way.
Several weeks after being admitted, Isabelle came to the attention of specialist maxillofacial surgeon Dr. Bernard Devauchel.
Salut. Ça va? Le tricot va bien? C'est nouveau?
Using conventional surgery, doctors were limited in what they could do to reconstruct Isabelle's face. But Dr. Devauchel believed there was an alternative.
This type of tissue loss requires this type of treatment. Everything else is just a makeshift solution. There is no real alternative. And these things are lost very quickly. The best way, the only way to fix it, is with a face transplant. The only thing that came up for discussion was that maybe our idea was a bit crazy. Were we going to go all the way with this, since it was the first time this opportunity had arisen?
For the past 20 years, a handful of surgeons have been working to revolutionize transplant surgery. They've been fighting to convince the medical establishment and reassure the general public that face transplants are nothing to fear. In what became known as the face race, teams of doctors in America, Britain and France all declared themselves to be ready and waiting to perform the first operation. At the Royal Free in London, surgeon Peter Butler has dedicated his career to researching face transplantation.
Facial transplantation is not a new idea. We've known for some time that this is technically possible because we've been looking at this for 14 years experimentally, now nearly 6 years clinically. We've had a lot of ups and downs in the process. I still am convinced that this is a good thing to do. There are more people thinking the same way, and so for me that's heartening because actually people have come around to thinking that this is actually a therapeutic possibility.
Doctors have been transplanting livers, kidneys and hearts for over 40 years. But faces have always been different. They are seen as a sacred and untouchable part of our identity. Unlike other organs, face transplants are not life-saving operations. As a result, ethical committees have always blocked them from going ahead.
20 years ago, a professor of plastic surgery mentioned this at a presentation and caused outcry, as in he felt it was a very logical thing to do. He went on Reuters and news agencies and whatever. He got hate mail. A lot of the profession were very doubtful about this as a reconstructive technique.
While the rest of the world was forced to wait, in France, surgeons Bernard de Vauchel and Sylvie Testelin believed that in Isabelle they had a unique case, worthy of ethical approval.
The biggest problem was not one of surgical technique. The biggest problem was putting our case forward to the authorities. Therefore, we had to fight to put forward a project that would be acceptable to them.
We want to do the best for the patient, and we have the right to take risks on her behalf. That's what's complicated. We ask ourselves, what is the best?
Convinced they would get the go-ahead, Testelin and de Vauchel assembled a team of specialists including world-famous transplant surgeon Jean-Michel Dubénard. Dubénard and his team were already medical pioneers, having performed the first hand transplant.
Once I had seen her disfigured face, no more needed to be said. I was convinced something had to be done for this patient.
While Isabelle waited for permission for her transplant, doctors were worried that her condition was deteriorating. Her muscles had slowly tightened, making it difficult for her to open her mouth more than a few millimeters.
At the start, I couldn't eat anything except mashed food because I couldn't open my mouth anymore. There was just enough room to get a small spoon in.
lips.
Whatever happens, it's a battle. I've made my choice. Even if I wanted it to, the part that's missing would never come back.
While Isabelle waited, doctors conducted extensive scientific tests to see how her brain might function after her transplant.
She's seen that there's still a little area in her brain which used to make her lips move. But her lips just won't move. Yet she knows there's something going bang bang in her head. She feels her lips move when she does her exercises.
MRI scans showed that even though her lips were missing, the part of her brain controlling them was still active, which should allow her to control the muscles of a new face. With daily physiotherapy to prevent her condition from deteriorating too far, all Isabelle could do was wait. If successful, Isabelle's operation could provide new hope to hundreds of people around the world living with the consequences of severe facial injury.
"5:15 sharp, I leave work. I didn't know what was going to happen next, God knows, 5 minutes.
In February 2005, Sundeep Hunjan was 22 years old and looking forward to her wedding day. She was on her way home from work when, in a completely unprovoked attack, she had acid thrown in her face.
That day was nothing compared to painful days that were waiting ahead. It was really, really horrible after that, because at that point I had all my skin on me, but it turned like dark brown, like chocolate brown, and then it was like all over, like the face, everything, the arms, the nails turned yellow.
I went to the Falklands. I was with the 1st Battalion Welsh Guards. I was in the mortar platoon. We were on board a ship called the RFA Sir Galahad.
Simon Weston was just 20 years old when his troop ship was struck by Argentine missiles.
Well, I was 49% burns, most of it full thickness over the body.
Leave! No! Quiet, lad, but just one move, go. Beautiful.
My heart stopped beating twice, apparently, so I'm told. Not that I was around for most of this, I've got to be honest about that.
As the wounds heal, or the open scars were healing, that's where now skin started like contracting, and that's when you notice, oh, my arm is tight, I can't, like your arm's bent and you can't straighten it, you know, like it's all tight, and your face is like turning, you can't really open, smile or do all the things you could. Then I notice, oh, my eyes don't shut properly. Just in days, things started getting worse, and it was really bad.
I had the best part of 5 years in and out of hospital, the majority of it in.
You got a infected fatal?
Oh, you know?
Yeah, infected fatal.
Well, I think that's a very reasonable fear, but I don't think that there's any real danger of it.
It was a very lonely and depressing and isolated state. I became very seriously involved in drink. I had post-traumatic stress disorder, which I didn't realise. But on top of that then came the depression, and then suicidal tendencies and thoughts, up to the point where I almost took my own life.
Oh, I wish I could just close my eyes now, get up in the morning, and as soon as I get up I want to see my face in the mirror and I look like I was before. And I don't want to see any patchwork on my face. I don't want to see any, mark on me. I just want to look like I was and say, I'm ready to go home and go on with life. But it just doesn't happen.
Peter Butler is frustrated by the limitations of conventional surgery in reconstructing the human face.
The skin of the face is very specialized. If you drop a line from your hairline down to your chin, you'll go through at least 5 to 6 different thicknesses of epidermis and dermis, different numbers of hair follicles, sweat glands, pigmentatory changes in the skin. If you think of the skin of the eyelid, it's very, very thin in comparison, say, to the cheek. So the thicknesses of those two elements are very difficult to reconstruct using thigh skin or back skin because it doesn't produce that type of look. So it's quite complex, and our reconstructive abilities are okay when we come to small areas of the face because we can borrow from other areas of the face to reconstruct it. But when it comes to damage of all the face, we don't have any spare skin of the face hanging around. We don't have any spare lips hanging around. So to reconstruct these with other parts of the body produces not a very good effect.
Conventional surgery has always been limited in what it can do with facial reconstruction. It's always been limited. Because yes, you can give a covering, but whether you can make it look normal is a totally different argument and question. My nose doesn't look normal. My eyes, my eyelids, they can't ever look normal. My ears.
My forehead's got skin from my thigh. My eyes, they got skin from my groin.
I mean, my eyelids came from there. And you can clearly see they couldn't match them. They don't look the same.
For my lip, they've got it from the back of my ears.
My nose came from my backside. It doesn't look the same. You know, so it's impossible to make it look normal.
The normal skin seems to be soft and has some elasticity. You can like pull things. It's not like that. Where you're burnt and skin grows back, it's really, really tight, hard, like stiff. You see, when you have like roast chicken that's really dry, yeah? That kind of feeling, like this skin is dry and the other one's smooth and soft.
After 4 months of waiting, doctors in Amiens were finally given the permission they had been waiting for. The ethical committee agreed that all the medical questions had been answered and Isabelle's operation could go ahead. Now Isabelle would have to begin the long and difficult wait for a suitable donor.
Unless you think things over carefully, it might seem like you're waiting for someone's death. So you can salvage part of them. It's an idea that is hard to shake off.
The donor had to be of a similar age and have the same skin color and blood group as Isabelle. Even if a donor could be found, there would be no guarantee the family would give permission for the face to be used.
Nobody can tell how long it's going to take. I need and walk around the hospital. When I hear the firemen and the ambulances, each time I think it might be someone who's going to die. And maybe I'll get her face. It's a hard thing to say.
Should they be successful, doctors plan to remove the nose, lips and chin from the donor face. As well as the skin and the underlying muscles, arteries and nerves would have to be carefully detached and connected to Isabelle's own face in a 15-hour operation. The operation would be a first, but the surgical techniques have been established for decades. During the Second World War, surgeons operating on a group of severely burned airmen, known as the Guinea Pig Club, used skin from different parts of the body to rebuild the face. with remarkable results. But surgeons always hit one problem. Whenever they tried to transplant skin from one person to another, it would always be rejected.
We thought it would be impossible to transplant skin in a human because of its antigenicity. In other words, it was very likely to undergo a rejection process. Clint Hallam, the first hand transplant, disproved all of that.
In 1998, a team of doctors showed that transplanting skin and muscle was possible when they successfully gave Clint Hallam a new hand.
My first thoughts when I saw my hand was that it was a miracle.
The operation had been made possible thanks to new anti-rejection drugs, which work to suppress the body's natural immune system to prevent donated organs from being rejected.
Immediately after the operation, the hand was very, very successful. It looked very, very healthy. There was a short rejection period, some 6 weeks after the transplant. And probably for the next 12 months, the hand was functionally doing well. I could hold a teaspoon.
But the immunosuppressant drugs had such devastating side effects that Clint failed to stick to his drug regime.
Can we have a look at the hand and just see what's happened?
All the way through the past 2 years and 5 months, there has been a constant small pockets of rejection. What we're looking at here now is a rejection episode which I call number 22. The doctors probably call it about number 4 and number 5.
Only 2 years after his operation, his hand was rejected, and he returned to doctors asking for it to be removed. In Amiens, the medical team were well aware of the long-term physical effects which lay ahead for a patient like Isabelle.
Quite frankly, having lived through the experiences of the hand transplants, you see the sheer stress it places on the patient.
Obviously, I had to make it clear that this treatment was not a certainty. That's without doubt the negative side of this whole thing.
No one could be certain whether any patient would be able to fully comprehend the full implications of this untested procedure. Many doctors fear that in their desperation, some patients might overlook the negative consequences. Nick Parkhouse has been a reconstructive plastic surgeon for the past 25 years. He doubts whether a face transplant would be in the best interests of any of his patients.
The problem with face transplantation remains the risks of immunosuppression. And at the moment, there are a lot of side effects with the sort of doses and the sort of drugs that need to be used to prevent the rejection of a large amount of flesh. They include cancer, which is obviously something which is to be taken very seriously, given that you have to take these drugs for the rest of your life to stop the face being rejected.
As well as leaving the body more vulnerable to infection and disease, some surgeons believe that immunosuppressant drugs could shorten a patient's life by 10 years.
I do think that anybody that would want to take immunosuppressants would be bonkers. It's not for me, but that's a personal thing. But then again, if I felt so bad about the way I looked, then I would be prepared to go through almost any hell to get rid of the problem that I had.
What's a life when you know I'm going to live till 100 and you're hiding in a room without a face? You're just hiding from the world. You're just living inside that house. What are you doing? What is the aim of being alive then? So it's worth it.
Even immunosuppressive drugs don't give you a 100% guarantee that you're not going to end up with rejection. It would mean that the face became very swollen and inflamed, and then ultimately became necrotic or died or gangrenous, and then had to be removed. But it would be a pretty horrendous experience for anybody.
Besides the medical risks, there are serious concerns about the long-term psychological consequences of transferring one person's face onto another.
The popular misconception of the general public is that if I donate the face of my loved one, I will see them walking down the street. And that really comes from the movie Face Off, which actually talks about an identity transfer. And in looking at the face, if you take the skin envelope off a face, which is pliable, and put it on the facial bones, it'll remold over those facial bones to give you most of the features from the facial bones beneath, but the skin tone and texture of the transplanted skin.
The computer graphic shows how a skin envelope is removed from the face of the donor on the left and placed onto the underlying bone structure of the recipient. The result is a new transplanted face, which is a hybrid of both faces combined. Photographs give a better idea of what the final outcome will be. The new face in the center has a distinct appearance, but looks more like the recipient on the right than the donor on the left. But some people remain unconvinced that taking on the face of another will be an easy thing to get used to. James Partridge was just 18 years old when his Land Rover caught fire.
This is what I saw the first time that I looked in the mirror. Pretty shocking, and I wasn't able to look at the full mirror actually when I first looked.
He understands better than most the difficulties of adapting to a new appearance.
Psychologically, taking a new face, somebody else's face on, is going to be difficult. It's difficult enough to adjust to your face being damaged and then surgically repaired and reconstructed. If you imagine looking in the mirror and seeing not your face but somebody else's staring back at you, will you like this new person that you're looking at? Will you be able to take it on and be this person? If you have your own skin transplanted, you can still say this is me and this is mine. And we're unclear whether psychologically it will be very easy for people to literally touch and feel and to allow others to touch and feel them. Will it be them?
If somebody can get used to looking like this, I'm sure they can get used to looking like they would with a different skin face. It's easy. You know, if you can get used to looking deformed and disfigured and being looked at in horror and reviled in the street, if you can get that, people turning away in aghast and embarrassment and disbelief, if you can get used to that, I'm sure people can get used to looking different in somebody else's skin. I don't think that's even a problem.
6 months after Isabelle's arrival at the hospital in Amiens, the call everyone had been waiting for finally came. A donor had been found 140 kilometers north in Lille. The first thing they had to check was whether or not it was a suitable match.
I had a call telling me that there was a picture waiting for me on my emails. So I finished my consultations and logged on and opened my emails and ended up surrounded by quite a circle of onlookers. Looking at the photos, I said, I think it will be okay. What does that mean? Let's do it.
Dr. Dubernard and Dr. Devauchel traveled to Lille, where they would begin to remove the face of the donor.
We had devised the scenario down to the very last detail. Okay. Our only worry was, how should I say, that we had waited too long and might have jeopardized our initial project as we had envisaged it.
While one team was working on the donor in Lille, in Amiens, another team had already begun to prepare Isabelle to receive her transplant. At 2 a.m., Dr. Devauchel called to say they had successfully removed the donor's face and that they could proceed as planned.
Ok, pas de problème. À tout à l'heure.
It needed perfect coordination between two teams working at the same time. Sylvie's task, and mine, was to prepare the receiver's face, which involved exploring the retracted, scarred tissue. Very difficult to access for a surgeon. And finding all the muscles, all the vessels, all the nerves that we had identified beforehand as essential parts to be rebuilt. A perfect match for those Bernard Devauchel was going to take from the donor.
At dawn, Dr. Dubernard and Dr. Devauchel returned from Lille. They then had just a few hours left to connect the donor face to Isabelle's blood supply in order to prevent it from dying.
Un accueil son comme d'habitude. Non, mais revente. Un prélèvement de moelle. Impec, hein?
Je vais la chercher.
Les vaisseaux, on n'a rien.
The tiny veins, nerves and arteries were dissected under a microscope. Each one had been labelled with a special code to ensure they were accurately reconnected. The face was then ready for attachment. Using threads finer than a human hair, the major facial arteries were stitched together. The crucial test was whether or not blood would flow through Isabelle's veins to the new transplanted face, bringing the flesh back to life.
C'est le moment de vérité. Si là ça passe, évidemment après il faut que ça dure, mais c'est gagné. Il faut que ça marche.
Au moment où on déclampe l'artère, où la circulation se restaure, c'est un moment extrêmement intense sur le plan émotionnel.
Il n'y a pas seulement que de la couleur, il y a du volume, il y a de la densité, il y a du battement. Et puis c'est devenu une partie d'un visage à l'espace d'une levée de clan.
With all the veins and arteries attached, the skin was finally stitched back together.
Quelque part, il y avait quelque chose d'un petit peu magique qui se passait. Et à ce moment-là, le chirurgien cesse d'être un chirurgien, il redevient un homme.
After 15 hours, the operation was complete.
Par se taper la tête au mur.
From now on, Isabelle would be monitored closely to see whether or not her body would accept the transplant. She had become the first person in history to have someone else's face.
Doctors in France say they've successfully carried out the world's...
Teams of surgeons were involved in the operation to replace part of...
It's the first operation of its kind in the world.
Partial face transplant.
Thank you. Those were the first words spoken by a French woman after waking up from an historic face transplant operation. Today, doctors in Lyon justified their decision to go ahead with the groundbreaking surgery, which has raised ethical questions. From Lyon, Caroline Wyatt reports.
Today, at a press conference in Lyon, the surgeons were quick to defend themselves from charges that the operation may have been unethical. What made you think you needed to do a face transplant? Was there no other option?
Just very simple. When I have seen the patient, when she removed her mask, it was very simple. If she were my daughter, no hesitation.
With the success of the partial transplant in France, Peter Butler has renewed his struggle to get permission to perform the first full-face transplant at the Royal Free in London.
When I heard the news of Isabelle Denoir's operation, I thought it was a wonderful step forward. It caused a significant change, both in public perception of the procedure, but also the professional perception of the procedure. So from that point of view, it's actually made me feel stronger about this as a process. We've reached the end, really, of both the experimental and other clinical experimentation process that we have undertaken, that we've reached a stage where the next step is actually to do the procedure.
Peter Butler has already begun to look for patients. If he gets the go-ahead, the first full-face transplant could happen within the next year.
We've been looking at people with pan-facial or full facial injury because that group needs all of the face to be replaced. So our process is slightly different. So we're looking at people following burn injury or trauma or an infective process where they've basically lost the facial tissue. So they're missing the skin of the face, but the muscles underneath are still functioning.
2 days after her operation, Isabelle saw her face in the mirror for the first time.
Sylvie gave me the mirror. I was scared to look at myself in case it hadn't worked, but when I did, it was already marvelous. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was going to be all bruised and swollen, that it was going to be ugly, but it was already wonderful.
After her operation, Isabelle was transferred to Lyon, where she would undergo months of medical tests. Even though the surgery had been a success, she will be in and out of hospital for the rest of her life.
We are in no way satisfied and relieved just because the operation is over. Quite the opposite. It is at that moment that the real work begins.
Once the surgical storm is over, and the complications that can arise from surgery are past, there remains a major immunological problem, namely potential rejection of the grafted area of the face. The challenge was to bring this patient to Lyon and examine very carefully whether there was any rejection and start treatments to avoid deterioration.
After several weeks, doctors are encouraged to see that gradually Isabelle showed signs of sensation returning to her new face.
They did some tests a week ago. I still can't feel heat or cold, but I can feel it when my lips are pricked, and I can feel them moving. And lower down it prickles a bit or itches.
On va mettre non sur le ici et 6-10. Magnifique. OK.
The tests take around 2 hours. I have to stay concentrated for 2 hours. And it's true, it seems like ages before we get to the end. I've just had 2 days of 2-hour sessions, one after the other, and it takes a long time. It's not hard exercise. Frowning, smiling, trying to raise the bottom lip. Because little by little, I'm beginning to resemble what I was like before.
Jamais de doute
Non.
et jamais de courant.
Non, non, non.
D'accord. C'est très bien.
Isabelle has been warned that since this is a first off, a whole series of examinations, lots and lots of them, are necessary in an attempt to monitor her in the best conditions, to pick up any abnormal phenomena as early as possible, using every method we have available, and also to record all this, so the experience can help future patients. If we look at hand transplants, between the 58th and 85th day, all our patients have encountered minor rejection problems.
As in most hand transplants, doctors detected some signs of rejection, but increasing the dose of her medication quickly brought the episode under control.
I managed to take my treatment all by myself. I've drawn up a calendar with the name of the tablets and all that. And I prepare all my own medication. That's one good thing. It's a big step.
I advise Isabelle to look at her face in a mirror at the same time every day in front of the same window, to make sure she picks up the first signs herself as soon as they might happen.
Non.
Prêt? Oui. Prêt? Oui. Prêt? Prêt?
C'est bon.
Si tu me dis ça, oui, c'est pour que tu baisses.
4 months after her operation, Isabelle is finally confronted by the glare of the world's media.
Since the day of the operation, I have a face like everyone else. Now I can open my mouth and eat. I can now feel my lips, my nose and my mouth.
As the first ever recipient of a face transplant, she will be the subject of media fascination for the rest of her life. With proof of the feasibility of face transplants, a second partial transplant has already taken place in China. But whether or not a full face transplant should take place here in Britain still sparks controversy.
In order to prepare the face for transplantation, you have to remove from the brain-dead donor all of the skin, the fat, much of the facial muscles, if that's what you're going to transfer as well. Just think for a moment of what that brain-dead donor would look like after that is removed. And that is what one is going to have to prepare the recipient to look like in order to receive the face transplant. And if they then lose that transplanted face, then they are going to be very, very much worse off than they would have been if they had stayed as they were.
There is a stage in all processes where you have to take that step, and in fact, looking at the history of transplantation and medicine, at some stage they reach a point in all experimental process where you say, okay, now is the time to do a human transplant.
The Royal Free Ethical Committee have reconvened to consider Peter Butler's application. They are due to make an announcement in a matter of days. Even if permission is granted, it remains to be seen how many patients will want the operation.
If it had been available, I would certainly have considered it. I would have weighed up, as I did with all other surgeries, I would have weighed up the risks and the benefits. I'm absolutely sure that in the present circumstances, with the present balance of risks and benefits, I would not have chosen face transplantation.
Very possibly would have considered it, thought about it in years gone by. But it was never an option. So I've got to keep it real and say it wasn't an option, so I don't really know. Might have, might not have.
When it happened to me, it was like, and I looked so much bad, and had someone told me such a thing, I'd be like, I wanted another face and I want to get, like, rid of this ugly face. If I choose between either sitting there disfigured and living a life, or I can take this opportunity to have the face transplant and get a chance to maybe live a life again, I wouldn't think twice but pick on the face transplant.
As the debate continues to rage, doctors in France are convinced they have done the right thing.
Of all the people who have a very poor quality of life or experience difficulties because of their injuries, only a small number of them will require a transplant.
There are certainly some people who didn't agree with what we did, whether through jealousy, because they were working in this area, and they thought that they were better placed to undertake such a project. Today, everyone agrees that the results were excellent, and that we were right to do what we did.
Was it possible for her to live without a face? What should we have done? Just imagine for a moment her life. It's easy to say in theory you shouldn't have done it, it wasn't a good idea. That doesn't alter the fact that her life has been changed. She has holidays, she goes for a walk, she's done her house up, she's decorated. She has a life now, you know. Before she had no life, she even scared herself. You can't live like that.
6 months ago, Isabelle was unable to go out in public. Now she has returned home and is hoping to live a normal life. But the implications of Isabelle's landmark operation are still uncertain.
Oh yes, I was saved. Loads of people write to me. They say that I need to be brave, that I need to fight on. That's wonderful. It's a sort of miracle.
Next week, Horizon meets the scientific prophets who believe that computer intelligence will soon be equal to our own, unlocking the potential for a new kind of human.
And that's at the same time, 9 o'clock here on BBC Two. Tomorrow, children and fathers coping with the loss of a mother. My Heart Belongs to Dad at 9.